Hello, everybody, and a very warm welcome to our webinar today, which is around struggling to engage first-year students, something I think all of us as academics have faced at some stage in our career. So I'm delighted to welcome along Demi Wang from the University of Melbourne. And Demi is our guest today, and she's going to talk to you about all things first-year students. Those of you who know Demi, or indeed those of you who don't know, she is well known for a very genuine focus on student experience and improving student outcomes. So Demi, a very warm welcome to you. We're delighted to have you with us today as our guest. So thank you for joining us.
No, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. And also a warm welcome to our guest, sorry, not our guest today, but our audience today. And I can see that our audience is from across Australia, New Zealand, Malaysia, and Singapore today, Demi. So quite a variety of demographics for us to engage with. So Demi, I have prepared some questions. So hopefully you'll be able to jump in and answer all of these for us. Demi and I will talk for approximately 20 minutes. And please feel free to drop any questions you have in the Q&A tab in Zoom, and we will attempt to answer those for you. The session will be recorded as well, so we will share that with you after the event. So I'm going to start off, Demi, and if you could tell the audience a little bit about your role at the University of Melbourne and the class or indeed classes that you teach there would be great.
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Demi, and I am a lecturer at the Department of Accounting here at Melbourne Uni. So the subject that I coordinate and teach into mainly is Introductory Financial Accounting, and within our program structure, it's a first year, second semester subject. So I usually have about, across the year, probably 1,000 students. So it's a really, really big cohort. So it's a core subject for any student doing BCom degree at the faculty here.
Well, that's a lot of students to manage, Demi.
Yeah, it is. It is, absolutely.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you for that, Demi. And what I'm going to ask you then is a bit of a follow-up to that, and especially given the size of that class and engaging students. What are some of the main challenges, would you say, that you've seen when it comes to engaging first-year students, and especially, as I said, a cohort that size?
Yeah, the big cohort size definitely puts a lot of challenges, if not restrictions, to what we can do in the subject. I guess the biggest challenge that I've noticed in the last few years, and I'm sure it's not anything new, is that students' university life is just a part of their life. It sounds like common sense, right? But I think from our perspective, we put a lot of effort into designing the subject and really wanting to provide an engaging experience for our students. But at the end of the day, this is only a part of many commitments and a lot of competing priorities that they're dealing with. So at the end of usually actually at the start of the semester, I usually ask my students, how many of you are having part-time jobs or working elsewhere while dealing with all the commitments here and workload here at the university, and 90% raised their hand. So really university, as important as we all know it is, and they're paying to come here, they still have a lot of other things going on. So I think that poses a lot of challenges because I have students who are competing or playing sports professionally. They have their own business to manage. They have other part-time job to deal with at the same time as well. So
we seem to have lost Demi there for a moment.
first year students, they are also experiencing that transition from high school coming into university. So I also find a lot of times the lack of engagement actually comes from I guess, the lack of experience in self-regulated learning. We don't, put a lot of detailed, I guess, agenda on what you need to do on a daily basis to be able to do well in the subject. And the onus is back onto them to manage that aspect of things. And that can get really overwhelming, which leads to, lack of engagement. They lose track of things, and then they will just start to disengage. So that is another challenge that I've found in my experience as well.
Yeah, Demi, and I think that's very interesting because I have found exactly the same, or especially over the last few years, just about every student raises their hand when you say who was to work while they're studying and so on. So very different to what it used to be. And I think you make a very good point that it's just a part of their lives, which is
Yeah,
different to the way it used to be. It was that kind of main focus. So I think we
yeah,
need to shift in terms of the way we look at that and the way we look to engage them. So I think it's a really important point. And I think also you want about the self-regulated learning. That is so true because we're kind of, put all the material and content out there, but we haven't really taught students how do they actually manage this. So it can be
yeah.
very overwhelming. I think is a very, very good point there for them. That's exactly the experience I've had. In terms then of one more question on around the introduction, what led you, Demi, to try using an edtech tool like Quitch in your teaching and looking at ways that you can use tools to engage?
Yeah, I guess I knew Quitch existed a long time ago.
Yeah.
I remember it was back in a CPA conference that I went to that I first heard of Quitch.
Mm.
And I've always been trying to use different edtech to help as part of the learning design in my subject. And I guess the trigger point was given all the challenges we talked about and given the large size of my subject, I wanted to have a way where we can put in a little bit of a structure to tell students, okay, this is based on our experience and expertise. We think these are the ways you should engage with the subject to help with your studies, but also acknowledging that everyone learns differently, everyone's dealing with university differently. So also putting in a little bit of flexibility in how they actually engage with the subject. So that's when I started exploring different tools or platforms which can shift the focus a little bit away from just the synchronous learning on campus from lectures and tutorials. And that's when Quitch sounds like a perfect fit to me back then because, like it's not reliant on students coming onto campus. They can manage how they deal with the questions that we release through the app. So that's how everything started.
Yes, no, interesting. Going back to that, yeah, self-regulated learning that you mentioned before. And as you say, people learn differently. And we have to be able to, be flexible and allow for that. Demi, I'll move on to integration, if you like, next. And how did you start using Quitch in your class? So, I was wondering, was it like weekly quizzes or revision?
Mm.
So I think that will help the audience in terms of how they would look to integrate something.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a little bit of background. Um, the subject that I teach always had 10%, which we call subject engagement. And historically, basically, it's talking about lecture attendance, participation, tutorial attendance, and participation. So again, very on campus and face-to-face learning focused. So acknowledging that everyone, not everyone learn that way. We've started shifting how we assess the 10% subject engagement. So what we started doing was to give students different options, which they have the autonomy to choose among from to demonstrate their ways of engagement, their commitment, and the effort put into learning the subject. So lecture, tutorial are still part of it. But on top of that, we also had weekly quizzes through Quitch, which they can do in their own time, anywhere really, wherever they were. And Living Materials is through 2 online quizzes every week. And the main format of questions was around just multiple choice questions, kept it really simple and easy. So students get 2 releases every week, including about 10 to 12 questions in each quiz. And the quiz questions usually reflect the content covered in the lecture for that particular week.
Okay, great. Next question then I had for you, again, Demi, was it easy to align Quitch with your existing teaching approach? So in terms of what had already been doing, and how did you find using the platform to create and deliver content to students? So obviously it can take a lot of time to create and deliver content. So I just thought
Mm.
I'd see what your experience was.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the main question type that I've been using is multiple choice questions, and I've always had a bank of those questions already. So the questions already exist. I didn't have to create new ones just for the sake of incorporating Quitch into the delivery method. Um, and I personally find creating content or uploading content onto the platform quite easy because you just put it into a CSV file and do the upload. It's literally a 5 second thing once you have the
Yeah,
questions ready.
yeah,
So that was never a challenge for me. And I think what will take a little bit of more time, and it's probably an extra step if Quitch is adopted, is if you want to provide feedback to students on the questions incorporated, um, which is something that I didn't personally do. And students did provide feedback on that, saying, if they could get feedback on questions saying not only your answer's wrong, but why and what are the resources they can go to help further understand that, it's going to be um, an extra help for them.
benefit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, Demi, one of the things we've introduced in our new AI engine is that we actually do now add explanation and indeed hints with those questions. So this
Okay.
has just been released, so you probably didn't even have an opportunity to look at it yet, but I can show you that at another time. But yeah, so because that was also feedback that we got, students had said it would be good to explain exactly why, and then also at times they felt it would be really helpful if they could get a little bit of help through, giving them a hint and then kind
Mm,
of get them to think more deeply about it and see if that can, push them across the line with understanding the context and the content. So yes, so we have worked on that. So it'd be great to get some feedback on that as well down the track and see if that's, and we hope very much helping our students. You've had really strong engagement from your students. In fact, I think you've had 89% engagement when I had a look,
mm.
which is incredible, Demi. What do you think helped drive that? And have you any tips on getting students, or what are the tips you would have on getting students to participate for other people? Because that is an extraordinarily impressive uptake.
I think, given how I did it, students choose to opt in to use Quitch as a way to demonstrate their engagement with the subject materials. So I guess at the get-go, they are already choosing to use Quitch because they think it suits their way of studying and it's the best way to keep them on track. So it's a choice they've made for themselves, not something that's being forced
Yeah,
onto them. So
yeah,
that's I think giving it a pretty good head start for them to really want to engage with it. And I think another thing that is, I guess, inherent in the design of Quitch is it's so easy to use. I spend a bit of time at the start of the semester to explain how the download and integration enrollment works. But once that's done, it's another app on the phone, which
mm,
students are so savvy about, and
mm.
they get notification. It's very low stake and high frequency. They can do it anytime they want on their phone as they're on the tram or, doing whatever. So it's really easy to get that
Yeah.
engagement.
Yeah, and I think it's coming back to that when we were designing it, Demi, and I know you were involved at the very early stages as well. That was one of the critical things students said. They wanted it to be mobile first. They always have their phone with them. They don't always have their laptop. And if you give them
Mm,
something productive to do while they're traveling on the train, they will do it. Otherwise, they will just, doom scroll up and down and so on. So,
yep.
so yeah, so that's interesting. You with that, yeah, same thing. And as you said, they're so used to having apps on their phone. It is just what they do, I guess. Dimi, I thought we talked next about results. And have you seen any measurable improvements in student outcomes? And if you'd like to talk to us about that a little bit.
That's a really good question because
Mm.
I think using a new technology or changing the way I design subject, it's easy. Sometimes it comes quite intuitively, but then the next follow-up question is always, so is it making an impact?
Yeah.
Is it making a difference in how students learn? I think the engagement part is probably the most observable. they are definitely, as you're saying, Rani, a lot of them kept using the Quitch throughout the semester. So engagement is across the semesters I've used Quitch, it's above 80% always. And I think from a learning outcome perspective, we currently are working on a research project just to look at how using Quitch has an impact, whether or how it has an impact on student outcome and retention. So we're at the data analysis stage, so we will have more to share on that. But just preliminarily, I did incorporate a few questions from the Quitch quizzes throughout the semester in the final exam. And just by very briefly comparing their performance during the semester when they first use the questions as compared to when they do the assessment at the end of the semester again, I could definitely see an improved performance from that perspective. But then obviously we will have more data to analysis on that aspect.
Great,
that
and
project.
some research. And I should have said earlier, of course, Demi, you don't teach only, but you also do some research. So it'll be, yeah, so I'm really excited to see what the outcomes of that research are as well. And hopefully we'll see a publication on that in the near future. So that's fantastic. Another question for you then. Did you notice any shifts in learning behaviors? Because Quitch is ultimately about changing behavior, like study habits and class participation.
Study habits for sure, because we find a lot of students in the past will leave all the studies up until the last few days before the assessment is due or before the exam revision period, which is, the first week after the semester even ends. But having that continuous quizzes throughout the semester and having such easy accessibility.
So you
Yeah.
were saying about behaviors, and in terms of, I think you were saying that engagement was really high. They were constantly going back in and practicing. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, correct. So that change of study habit from leaving everything to last minute just for the purpose of getting assignments done to actually having regular checkpoints throughout the semester to help them understand how they're going. Um, and also a result of that is I find students become more aware of all the knowledge gaps, because usually without regular quizzes and checking points, they rely on feedback from assignments to understand how they're performing. But with the quizzes that we were releasing on a weekly basis, I get more questions and attendance at consultations, seeking feedback and reaching out to teaching staff to help them understand why they got questions wrong. So that awareness of what's lacking in their understanding of the subject content was also quite obvious with the use of Quitch.
And that's, I mean, such an important thing, as you say, for the student as individuals to identify where their own learning gaps are. And yes, unless we make them aware of that and give them that personalized feedback, then really, they can be a bit lost in the system. So I love that they're turning up for a consultation and asking more questions and finding out exactly where they may be going wrong. So that's a great outcome, Demi. I love that. And another question I have then is, what kind of feedback have students given you about their experience with Quitch, and what aspects of Quitch did they respond well to?
Yeah, I think for this one, I might just read a few comments from students
Sure.
from their quick feedback survey that I did. So one, a lot of comments is around how they like to do it on their phone when they're on the tram, or very similar comments like this, which I think is talking to the aspect of how it's easy to use and really accessible. There were comments about the Quitch quizzes were quite useful in consolidating my learnings from each week. So that concept check, regular concept check, and that impact on helping them absorb the content that's covered in lectures and tutorials. Which questions help me the most? I can get a constant review of my knowledge by finishing a few quizzes that doesn't take a lot of my time on a weekly basis. So again, that regular checkpoint and immediate feedback from their performance on the quiz. And another one is not written, but in my own tutorial, I remember students coming in and asked me, Demi, guess who's the black op? I don't remember the specific alias. Guess who that is on the leaderboard? And they're getting quite excited of the small wins of getting high on the leaderboard and that gamification aspect of that as well.
But you were just finishing up there, or I think you were finishing up on the point about the gamification and the leaderboard, how they were arriving into class and talking about, hey, guess who the black opal so and so is.
Yeah. I was and sorry about that. I think my internet connection is just playing up today. But yeah, I was just talking about how students are getting quite excited over those little wings that they're getting
Yeah,
on the leaderboard, even though they can't really see who the others are.
yeah,
But they know relatively, doing quite well,
yeah, yeah.
and that's motivation actually for them to keep doing the quizzes because the more times they do it, the higher chances they'll get higher up on the
Yeah,
leaderboard.
that's
So
exactly
that,
right.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, no, I love it. That's great. I mean, that's really good feedback in terms of the experience, the fact that it's, accessible to them or meeting when where they're at on the train, on the tram, consolidating the learning. I love that, which is exactly one of
Mm,
our main reasons for building Quitch. And then as you said as well, that immediate feedback, which when you have 1,000 students to be able to provide personalized feedback at scale is critically important to success. And then the gamification, the leaderboard, that they're really getting into that and having some fun while they're learning as well, which is fantastic. So that's great. There's really good feedback from your students. I have then, because we're almost out of time, and I said we talk for 20 minutes, but we've gone for 25, Demi, but that's okay. We do have the recording. We'll be able to share with everybody. So I've just got two final things for you, and it's around advice. So my first question was, what have been your biggest takeaways from using Quitch in your teaching? Just for the audience,
um,
be helpful.
yeah, I think the biggest takeaway for me is engagement. I think it comes naturally and improves when the design of delivery and the use of adoption of different educational technologies feels supportive and collaborative with students rather than, it's almost like fighting with what everything else amazing that they're trying to do with their lives. So I find that which in my case worked really well and really worked to drive engagement because the message at the start to my students is we're using this as another way for you to show your effort in the subject. We don't want to dictate, you have to come to lecture, you have to come tutorials. So they really understand it's trying to, while putting a structure in place for us to understand how they're tracking, but also giving them that flexibility to learn in the way they prefer and show their engagement in the way they prefer. So I think that really gets a lot of buy-in from students to want to engage in what we do and what we are trying to achieve in the subject. Um, and I think that's probably the main one. And
Yeah.
yeah.
I think that's a really good point, Demi, though, as well, because when we originally designed and built Quitch, we very much had the student voice in it, and I'm a great
Mm,
believer in having the student voice in our solutions. So I think the fact that you're saying the students feel it a very supportive and collaborative tool is really that I think that's critically important. And I think as educators, we need to keep talking to students when we are building solutions and making sure that we have their voice in there. I think too often and we can, think we're the fountain of all knowledge and we go along creating these solutions and so on that aren't necessarily the most supportive or collaborative way for helping the challenges or supporting the challenges the students face. So I think, yeah, and I think it's really important that you made that point. But I think just another lesson for you and I and other educators and the audience is for us to keep listening, to keep asking students, how can we best help you and so on. I think it's,
mm.
it's critical for their success. And finally, I have for a final one for you. What advice would you give to others teaching specifically first year classes who are trying to improve engagement and outcomes, Demi? Because you have done it very, very well.
And I'm really glad you said listen to students, because that's exactly my advice.
Right, right. Yeah.
Listen to our students. And I think the solution to engagement comes from their feedback to us.
Yes.
Instead of, sitting away and thinking about, I want engagement in certain ways, sometimes it's more effective to see from their feedback what's not working and use that as a starting point to build how we deliver the subject. And the idea of using Quitch as part of how I assess subject engagement now, or the rationale for doing it, comes from student feedback. When I had just lecture attendance, participation, and tutorial performance, students were telling me how they see why, but it just doesn't work for them if they have a million other things going on and they have to travel 2 hours just to get to uni.
Yes.
So I guess it's a solution to the problem that they've raised, which also happened to work within our teaching philosophy and design. So I think that would be the best way of engaging our students.
Yeah, fantastic. Demi, I think that's really great feedback. And again, we just pushing home that point about listening, listening
Mm.
to our students and what they've got to say. Demi, we are out of time, Demi, but I'm just going to check if there is any questions from the audience before everybody drops off. Do we have any questions for Demi? We will send you, I promise you, we will send you the recording of the session as well. But I'm just going to check if there's nothing there right now. But we didn't give you much time either, audience. So I apologize for that. But I think it was great for us to hear all of these insights from Demi, who has been working with a very large cohort. I mean, that is an extraordinarily large number of students to manage. Many of us might have hundreds of students, but I think not too many of us these days have 1,000 or more, Demi. So I think it's and it's a credit to you, the level of engagement you're getting. I have to say at that it's quite remarkable. In fact, I think you're getting over 80% engagement with a cohort so large. So I want to say congratulations to you. You're clearly doing a number of things right, Demi. And the
Thank
University of
you.
Melbourne are very lucky to have you. So, Demi, on that note, I just want to say a huge thank you for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. And again, congratulations on everything you're achieving. We look forward to your research publication and finding out about the outcomes and so on. And thank you so much to the audience as well. And Demi and I, we will share this recording with you. And feel free, please, to reach out to either of us if you have any follow-up questions. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. And thanks again, Demi.